Daisy.
And I'm Terry.
And this is the Monday Mindset Podcast,
where we share things of interest to us and hopefully to you.
So let's get started with episode number 247. And this week it is Terry's turn to share something she has found to entertain us with. Terry, what do you have?
Well, Daisy, I decided I was going to branch out a little bit and look for something else to share. And sometimes you and I find topics that are, really life-changing, dig deep kind of things. And today is not like that, but hopefully it leads to some fun conversation. So I went to a podcast called Stuff You Should Know. And the description of the podcast says, if you've ever wanted to know about champagne, Satanism, the Stonewall Uprising, chaos theory, LSD, El Nino, true crime, and Rosa Parks, then look no further. Mm-hmm. And then the two podcast hosts are Josh and Chuck. So what it is they come up with a topic and then they do research and then share about it and discuss it.
Right.
Sound familiar? Mm-hmm. They have some longer episodes and they have some shorter episodes. And some are kind of history events that they might share. And some are just, how does this thing work? So I first listened to an episode about itching. Like, why do we itch? And it was kind of interesting. And, one of those things, I don't know if you've ever thought about, like, why do we itch? And why is it different sometimes? And why do some people do it differently? And my partner swears that she has spoken with her doctor about the fact that she has a high sensitivity to itchy skin and cannot stop scratching and will get to the point of kind of bleeding and things. And I'm thinking, no, you just need to stop. But why is it that she itches more or scratches more? So anyway, that was the first episode I listened to. And it was about a 30-minute episode, all to say there's a chemical response, and we don't know that much about it. So I thought, well, what else could I look at here? And there are topics like being gullible. So look out, folks. That may be coming next. And this topic, I had to laugh because you don't usually do this. But before we got started today, you asked me what the topic was. So you could start yourself a little how to listen to the episode thing of notes. And I said, why your skin gets pruny in the bathtub. And you turned and looked at the screen like, did I hear you properly? Really? So yes. So this episode is called Short Stuff, meaning it's a short episode. Short Stuff, Pruny Skin. Because I know everyone is curious. Why do my fingertips get pruny? So the episode starts by one of the hosts has a daughter. I think she may be in elementary school, and she likes taking baths. And so one Saturday morning, she went in to take her bath, and she's in there playing with her action heroes and just chilling, enjoying it. She stayed in the bath for 7 hours.
7 hours? Bloody hell.
And he said at some point he would go in and say, okay, world record has now been met, 4 hours. And she, thought it was funny and she just stayed. And when she came out, she raised her hands up and said, Dad, look. And of course, she had very pruny fingers. And it made him think, we should do an episode about this. We should learn why our fingers get to look like prunes in the bathtub. Now, he also said that he took a picture and he was sharing it with the co-hosts and said, I'll post this on social media. So, of course, I went and looked him up and I could not find the photo of the daughter's pruny fingers. So I started listening and, this, again, was a very short episode, mostly just funny things that the two of them say to each other. But they got to a point where they talked about the old theory about why our fingers do this was that it was osmosis, that it was the kind of movement of fluid in and out of parts of our skin. So that because of the exposure to water, that the water comes out of the skin into other parts of the body, and there you're left with these wrinkles. But that theory has kind of been disproven. And they started thinking that it's more of an automated response in the body. like the nervous system is doing this for some reason, that it's not just in response to the water. And one of the reasons they realized, they being scientists, because, this is really weighty stuff, that one of the reasons they realized that it wasn't just osmosis is, why is it not other parts? Why are your arms and legs and shoulders not pruny? It's the fingertips and the toes. So there must be some reason why this happens, or some other way of explaining it.
Yeah, because it happens. I've had that happen where I've been gardening all day in wet gloves or something, or if you've got wet socks that you've had to carry on wearing for a while. It happens, doesn't it? You don't have to be immersed in water.
That's right. So again, what is it then? What causes that if it's not just exposure to a lot of water? And so in 2011, a guy in Idaho named Mark Changiz said that he created a little theory. And so, of course, then other people started testing it. And he was an evolutionary neurobiologist. So, he wasn't just some guy playing around in the bathtub thinking, oh, this is science, let's figure this out. So they start looking at it, and he proposed that it's a biological response, and then people wanted to understand it. What purpose would it serve? Because our body generally doesn't want to do extra work that's unnecessarily using energy. So why would the body do this? So a group in the UK at Newcastle University took this theory and put it to the test. They didn't really describe the study, but I'm just guessing they had to soak their hands and get them pruny. And then they tested, does it serve a purpose? And what they found is that people whose fingers were pruny, that they could pick up wet marbles much more quickly and with ease than if there were not the pruny, wrinkles on the skin. And they tested dry marbles, wet marbles, and things. And so their theory is really that it's kind of like treads on a car tire, that
Grippers.
it provides more grip, or as my friends and I used to call it, gription. It's traction and grip combined, but in that the water then flows into the gap, and the part that's remaining and touching the object makes you have better grip. And so they really are thinking that there's a reason why our body does this. And if you maybe then think of it from a survival place, if I'm in water and I need to get out, maybe I have a better chance of climbing out of that abyss if I can actually have some gription on the sides of the tank or whatever.
Yeah, it makes sense with your feet and your hands. Yeah.
Like frogs. It causes some more traction for us. And so he felt quite smug. He had found the answer and shared it. And the other guy says, I'm not totally buying it, because is it that there's a purpose and that's why our body does it? Or are we just finding that it happens naturally and it does provide a service, but it didn't evolve because of that? And so the question still lingers. Why do our fingers and toes get pruny in bathwater?
And does it not happen to everybody?
Interestingly, that's part of the reason why they came up with this theory that there had to be something else, that it wasn't just osmosis. Because if they take someone who has nerve damage at the end of their fingers, it does not happen. So if it were just water going in and out, that would happen regardless. There's a reason why the body does that. And, nerves are sensing the water and doing something differently. So this has actually helped kind of promote the need to figure out a different theory.
And I suppose it's tied into, and what the guy was saying, whether it's just something that sort of just happens and we've learned to make use of it. But if you think, and, our fingerprints are unique, but the tips of our fingers and our toes are the same, that they have those ridges that other parts of your body don't have.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, is that the reason? So when that gets wet, those ridges get exaggerated, whereas where your skin is smooth somewhere else, maybe that does sort of expand, as it were, but you don't notice it because it's not rich, so it doesn't do the same thing. Interesting question.
Wait, do you mean that you think our fingertips are designed the way they are, not so that we could do fingerprinting identification?
Happy accident.
That's right. So I just thought it was kind of a fun little topic because I am someone who once in a while thinks about weird things like this. Like, why does that happen? And of course, I often don't research it and find out why it happens. So I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to enjoy this podcast because they do the research and check into, do we know why this happens? Or do we understand what really happened at this historical event that we all learned about this way? So look out, folks, because I don't know what's coming next. I might choose some really other off-the-wall topics here besides pruny fingers. But I'm curious, Daisy, just as you've been listening to this, are there any of those kinds of things that you wonder about? Like, not just physically about us, but, why does this kind of paint do this and this kind does something different? Are there those kind of weird little questions that you have lingering at times?
Yeah, I suppose I do. Of course, I can't think of any at the moment. But yeah, I do tend to question things. And sometimes you see those posts on social media where kids have asked those kind of questions. Well, why does that happen? Something that we just sort of take for granted. It's the kind of questions that your parents always used to say, well, it's just what it is. That's just what it does. Or, that's just how it is. It's just something that we've got used to being like that. But it takes a child with that kind of perspective to say, well, yeah, but why? And sometimes, of course, there is an easy answer. I can remember asking my dad something like, something about the cat's eyes in the road. Well, how come you can see them this way and you can't see them? And he's an engineer, so he would explain these kind of things to me. But there'd be the kind of questions you ask that there is no easy answer to, or there isn't a definitive answer to. There are just more questions.
Absolutely.
What about you? Are there any sort of weirdly random questions that you've always wondered that you've never found an answer to?
Kind of like you. I know there are, and I've probably said them to people, but I'm not thinking of them right now. I should have given myself some time before this to think about some of them.
These days of Google, of course, you can always ask Google, and somebody else has probably thought about it. I'm always surprised sometimes when you're sort of thinking of something, you think, well, that's a weird thing to think of, and you put it into Google, and like a million other people have been asking the same question.
Well, and in this example, some people have gotten together and devised a research study to figure this out, which probably means either their academic department supported it or they got some funding. It's like, is it really that important of a thing to understand that we should put research dollars toward it? But, it was weird because as I asked you that, Daisy, I was just looking at you on the screen, and obviously in the podcast, we're just voices, but we can see each other during this time. As you started talking, I was looking at you and I was looking at me, looking at you, and I'm like, why are my eyebrows moving? Why do we have eyebrows? And it just made me think about the fact that I do have a lot of weird little questions about things. And as I said, I usually don't go research them, but I'm sure I have hundreds of these little questions floating around.
It's funny what you said there about research. I think it's really important that people do research things like that. You think of how many things have been invented, or things have been figured out, or some new product has been created quite often as a happy accident of research into something else. The research project has been for one thing and it ends up being useful for something completely different that nobody's ever thought of. That's the beauty of things like that. It's just finding out about stuff inspires creativity, creates creativity, this pursuit of knowledge.
And you're reminding me of something that I did listen to at some point. I don't remember why, but it was all about the product called Febreze. I don't know if it's something you have in the UK, but it was new at the time.
Revolting stuff.
That they didn't spray stuff on carpet or on clothes to make them smell a certain way. And they kind of happened upon it almost accidentally and then had to develop it and then market it because people would think, why would I spray that on my furniture or whatever? But like you said, oftentimes by looking into one angle of it, we discover other things. And obviously there are medication discoveries like that. They're trying to treat one thing and they create a medication, and whether or not it achieves that goal, they find that the side effects are such that we can use this now for this instead. So yeah, you're right. There is value in understanding these things, but I just had to laugh. Like, wonder if my PhD program had been focused on understanding pruny fingers.
Yeah, it's how and who you manage to persuade to fund research projects like that that's interesting. It reminds me of a podcast I used to listen to, and it stopped round about COVID time, I think, and hasn't picked back up again, which is a shame, because I used to really enjoy it. The nice little short episodes, around about 20 minutes. It's called The Boring Talks. And each week he used to have somebody on doing a presentation about something boring, quote unquote, that they found fascinating. And it would be on all sorts of weird and wonderful and boring sounding, often, things. Like, there was an episode all about double yellow lines, and there was an episode about, the little pieces of folded up paper you get in Kinder Surprise eggs. Actually, aren't they banned in America? You're not allowed Kinder eggs in America, are you? I seem to remember watching something about this. Kinder eggs don't exist in America. I don't think you're allowed them for some kind of health and safety reason. Kinder Surprise. So there's sort of like an Easter egg. There are like a mini egg. I think it's white chocolate on the outside, milk chocolate on the inside, hollow egg. And then inside the egg, there's a little plastic, almost egg-shaped case, which you open up, and there's a tiny little toy inside it, often that you have to assemble in some way. I mean, this is something that I take for granted. I don't know. I don't think they were around when I was young, but I remember them from quite a long time ago. They've certainly been around here for a long time. And they did used to be all the rage. I think there are so many other things that have overtaken it these days. But they were a real treat for kids. You got the chocolate egg and not too much of it. They're quite small and thin and hollow. And then you get a little toy in the side. It's a surprise. You don't know what you're going to get. So it was all very exciting. And yes, I'd completely forgotten. I think it's for some kind of health and safety law that they're not allowed in the States, but I think almost every other country has them. And there's a little folded up leaflet that I think has information or health and safety information, something like that, and I can't remember now how many different languages. But it's this tiny little piece of paper with tiny little writing. And so there was this whole talk about the information that was on this leaflet and how it differed in the different languages, different countries, and what information they deemed was appropriate to put on there, etc., etc. And I think it was in that episode that I learned that they're illegal in the United States. So yes, it just reminded me a bit of that podcast, because you would learn some sort of actually really interesting. Of course, that was the funny thing about the podcast. It was the boring talks, but well, at least I found them very interesting. You would learn interesting stuff about sort of everyday things that you hadn't really questioned.
Mm-hmm. Well, this sounds like kind of replacement for it. But as you were talking, Daisy, I thought, well, I've never heard of the boring talks. Let me quickly look it up. First topic that pops up is farts.
Yeah.
Pencils.
I got a feeling there was a whole episode on animal vaginas, something like that.
Pencils, because, that's fascinating. Jigsaws. Come on now, that is interesting.
I'd forgotten about that one.
Wooden pallets. Breakfast cereals.
Oh, yes, the wooden pallets. I remember that one. That was quite interesting. The codes on wooden pallets, what they mean. Yeah.
Lamp posts.
Yeah.
And there definitely is one on Kinder Egg linguistics.
Yeah, there you go.
Fascinating.
I think you'd enjoy it.
Not such boring talks after all.
Yeah, exactly. That sounds like a good podcast. Remind me what it's called? Things You Should Know, was it?
Stuff you should know.
Stuff you should know.
I was thinking you and I talk about these things sometimes, but it used to be that I was very intentional about podcasts and I was looking for certain types of speakers and certain health things or mindset things. And now I'm interested in learning about pruny fingers and why we itch. But I was thinking, I like this, and I wanted to listen to a bunch of the episodes because they're really just little curiosities that don't take a lot of brain power to listen to. Great to do while I'm doing a jigsaw or something else. So I will definitely be listening to some more of these episodes.
Just a bit of fun to learn something new. Yeah, there's a podcast that I haven't listened to, but she popped up in my feed. A woman called Callie Beaton. I think she's a stand-up comedian and does different presentations and public speaking and all sorts of things. Maybe an author. I need to find out more about her because she's very funny. But she's popped up on my feed. The first one I saw is a term that she's come up with, rather like mansplaining, mass-lighting. She's got this little brief video. And so she has all these examples of, men basically mansplaining, mass-lighting. And it just reminds me of that episode I did about the book Everyday Sexism. And so she appeals to me, and her podcast looks quite good fun. It's called, I have to self-bleep myself, but it's called Namaste Mother Crackers. So as you can tell, it sounds like it might appeal to me. And she interviews different people. That looks like quite good fun, so I might start listening to that. But yes, just things like with the Everyday Sexism book, things that she comes across every day. I think with this mass lighting little short video she did, it was basically this guy was sort of saying, I've never heard of you. And I hadn't heard of her, but I hadn't heard of her. And it's like, wow, you're funny. I'm going to go and find out more about you. Whereas his knee-jerk reaction was, I haven't heard of you. Oh, that's right. He said, I haven't heard of you. And his girlfriend was saying, oh, yeah, she's really famous. She's been on Live at the Apollo and she's really funny. And I follow her on Instagram and this, that, and the other. Well, I've never heard of her. I've watched all of the Live at the Apollos and I know all the comedians and I've never heard of you. So, of course, the implication was, well, she can't be a comedian then. So this was this whole mass lighting. And it's like, oh, God. And so she's coming up with these examples all the time that she's just getting all the time. That she's finding that she gets, like, she was mansplained about tech equipment with the mic when she went on stage, whereas the young guy who'd been presenting before her hadn't been given the speech from the tech guy that she had. And he actually didn't know anything about it and had struggled. And she did know a lot about it, but he still felt the need, you get the picture. So you can appreciate that. Yes, I find her very funny. So that's someone new to me that I've stumbled across. And she's also got a very cute little dog called Jeff who appears in her videos. She's one of these people who makes little videos while she's taking Jeff for a walk.
Nice.
So I like that when someone new pops up on my feed that I find interesting or funny.
Yeah, just make you think, but not have to think too deeply, but just kind of poking around in there.
Exactly. Add to the funny dog videos and all the other things that I entertain myself with.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, that was a bit of fun. And another thing to add to my list. Thank you very much.
And the next time you get pruny fingers, you're going to think of this, Stacey.
Yeah, I'll be able to gription my way out of the bath.
Let's hope.
Well, until I see you next time, have a very wonderful week.
Take good care, everyone.